Great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today from wherever you're joining us. We're really excited to have this program for you today. My name is Crystal Angako, and I'm from the Office of Alumni Relations here in Baltimore. I'm here to introduce Christin Lay, who is our student who is leading this event for us this afternoon. Christin is a sophomore studying public health and both neuroscience at Hopkins and is currently home based in California. So with that, Christin, I'll toss it over to you. You may need to unmute one of your cameras.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Perfect. Yes.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Christin. I'm a sophomore studying public health and neuroscience, like Crystal mentioned. So this bakery started this past spring. So when I came back home to Orange County, California, COVID hit Orange County pretty hard. We were one of the first cities to have COVID cases. And so when I got home, I noticed that a lot of my friends and family were working on the healthcare front lines and working endlessly to fight COVID and help any patients that they can. And so at the same time, I was baking a lot for my friends and family. This was during the time when all of us were kind of new to social distancing, and I wanted to keep in touch with everyone at home. So I would bake and I would deliver it to my friends and family a lot. And then seeing my friends and family also work on the front lines, I wanted to tie in this idea of contributing to a greater cause. So I took a step back once summer hit, and my research opportunity at UC Irvine, which is the closest UC school to where I live. I originally had a research project I was going to do there over the summer, but unfortunately due to COVID, it was canceled. So I took a step back and I thought, what should I do now in the summer now that everything's canceled? I'm on the pre-med track, so I can't go into the hospital and volunteer. So I thought about how I wanted to bake and start a bakery for the longest time, but never had the opportunity to do so because I thought that being on the pre-med track and wanting to start a bakery, they were two very different paths that didn't have much overlap. And so on a whim, I just texted my friend, like, what if I started a bakery? Because I don't really have anything to do this summer anyways. And so instead of just like playing around with the idea, we took up on it and we started doing graphics with my friend Jane. She is an arts major in which she designed. She put countless hours into the Crumb Bakery logo. And then I came up with the recipes. And then it started snowballing into delivering to my friends and family. And then I also wanted to add the mission going back to seeing my friends and family work tirelessly on the front lines. I wanted to add the mission of helping those more than in just my local community. And so I thought I would add on the detail of donating 20% to Doctors Without Borders for every order. And that's made through Le Crumb. And so throughout the summer, I've just been baking and preparing for sophomore year. And then over the summer, I also applied to 2 scholarships or grants and funds at the Hopkins Life Design Lab. So I just applied it also on a whim, thinking I wouldn't really get it because this was a bakery and I knew there were a ton of research projects that were being applied with me in the same application pool. So I didn't think much of it. But then 1 or 2 months later in late summer, I actually got accepted for both of those grants. So one of those grants was this KitchenAid mixer right here that you guys see. And then the other one was a huge grant of $1,000 in which they gifted to me, and I just spent on all these ingredients and like supplies, baking supplies. And so I posted on Instagram thanking the Life Design Lab in Hopkins for being so generous and supporting my dream. And then the Hub, Johns Hopkins newspaper, picked up on my story. And so some of you may have seen that article on the Hub, read about the same story that I'm talking about now. And then later on, a couple more months go by, still baking, still trying out new ideas. A local magazine from Orange County, some of you may know, Orange Coast magazine, also picked up on my story and thought this would be a great feature, especially with some of the nonprofits I work with. It ties in very well. And so this November, actually, in the November issue, they came out with an article about me, in which some of you may have seen on our social media, in which it features Le Crumb Bakery. And so now we're here. I'm really thankful for every single one of you who have just spent this like summer morning with me, and also for supporting me in every step of the way and making me believe that I can do all of this. So yeah, that's the story of how it comes.
Thanks so much, Christin. That was wonderful. So we can go ahead and get started. Everyone received the ingredient list, and I hope a lot of you have had the chance to already pre-measure out and bake alongside with Christin. She will be focused on the baking portion of it, or the putting together of the delicious items. So I'm going to be focusing in on the chat as well as the Q&A. So feel free to drop any questions you may have, and I'll relay them to Christin as she's going through the process. But with that, take it away, Christin.
Sure. So I have all the ingredients laid out. If you guys haven't grated your carrots yet, I recommend you doing that now. That process took me the longest time preparing this dish. And I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees. Cakes will bake for 30 minutes or until you poke a fork or a toothpick in the middle and it comes out clean. But I just have that preheated so the oven's nice and warm. So right here we have all our dry ingredients. I don't know if you guys can see. Okay, so you have the flour, the baking soda, salt, cinnamon, and nutmeg. And then we have the brown sugar right here. And then, let's see, ingredients for the flaxseed eggs, in which it's ground flax seeds and water to replace the eggs so that we can make this as a vegan dish. And then right here, we have the grated carrots. And then over here we have chopped walnuts, lemons, powdered sugar for the buttercream. And so what I want to start doing is, for those who are making it vegan, I'm going to start with the flax eggs, the flaxseed eggs. And you want to make sure that the flax seeds are grounded because usually they're sold as whole, like kind of pellets. But if they aren't grounded, they're not going to give you the texture of like what eggs would in a cake. So I'm just gonna pour about half a cup of water into 2 tablespoons of flax seeds. And then I'm gonna take a spoon and mix it up to make sure that all of the ground flaxseed is absorbed and mixed well. And I'm just gonna set that aside while I start putting the carrots in the stand mixer. I like working with the wet ingredients first to make sure that they're all well combined. So I'm just gonna pour all of this in. And then along with that, I'm gonna put in the brown sugar. Spoon. Let's get this out. And brown sugar is in. And then we need a half a cup of olive oil. Any oil works really. You really don't taste the oil when you bake this cake. So whether it be vegetable oil, canola, anything really works. This is just what I had on hand. Okay, so half a cup of oil. And then I'm just gonna scoop this so the oil doesn't get everywhere. Okay, so those are most of my wet ingredients. I'm just gonna put on this paddle attachment and then give everything a little mix. And you want to give it a mix until you don't see any brown sugar clumps, since you want to make sure that anyone eating this cake, the sugar is well dissolved into the carrots. Okay, that looks good. And then I'm also going to get a lemon and then add about a tablespoon into the wet ingredients so that the carrots keep their orange color as much as possible when they bake. I'm just going to get the seeds so that they don't go totally brown when they're baking. Okay. And then while I'm squeezing this lemon, the reason that we started with the flaxseed eggs first was because you wanted it to soak in the water. I'm just going to toss this way. You want it to soak in the water so that it becomes kind of like a slurry. And that takes about 5 minutes, which is just enough time to mix all of our wet ingredients. So after the lemon, I'm just, yeah.
We have a quick question. Judy would like to know if you can just repeat what should be inside the bowl right now.
Yeah, so I just added all of my grated carrots and then the brown sugar, and I gave that a rough mix. And then I just squeezed in half of a lemon, or about a tablespoon, and then I'm just going to add a splash of vanilla extract. So now that's all set. And then I'm going to give it one more mix before I add in the flax eggs. Okay. And then now that it's been a couple minutes since you added the water to the flaxseed eggs, you should notice that it's thicker. It has a thicker consistency. You can feel it when you're mixing, especially, than it was originally. So I'm just going to pour this in. Okay. Set this aside and give it one last mix. Awesome. So it's going to look very wet right now, like very watery, but not to worry because we're going to add our dry ingredients now. So our dry ingredients, like I said before, it's just flour, baking soda, salt, cinnamon, and nutmeg. For those who haven't measured the flour out before, a trick I like doing with flour, especially in anything I'm baking, is when you're getting it out of the bag, make sure to take a spoon and like mix it up and make sure that it's like all loose. And the reason we want to do that is to make sure that the flour isn't so densely compact when you're scooping it out into your measuring cup. And so it gives your cake or bread or whatever you're making a lighter texture. And so when you do get it out of the bag, you just want to scoop it, like air it up, like fluff it basically. And then when you do scoop it into the measuring cup, instead of, I used to do like take the measuring cup and then scoop it out of the flour bag. But a trick I learned is to actually take the spoon and then scoop it into the measuring cup and then level it off with a knife or like a flat surface of the spoon so that you don't have an excess of flour compared to your wet ingredients. So with my dry ingredients, I'm just going to mix it up, make sure everything's well combined before I add it to the wet ingredients. And then also with that tip, with the flour, it does save you on sifting when it comes to cakes. So it saves a little bit of time since sifting can take longer. So I'm gonna add about a third of my dry ingredients. I don't wanna add it all at once because it might be harder to mix with the wet. And then also like I don't want the flour splashing everywhere. Okay, so I'm gonna start on low again. And then right when it's about 80 to 90% all mixed, I'm gonna continue adding more. And you just wanna mix until everything's just combined. You don't wanna mix too much to develop too much gluten in the flour and make it chewy. Okay. again. And at this point, you should see that the carrot cake batter is coming together. I'm just going to add the remaining dry ingredients. Just a little bit more. Okay, awesome. So everything's in the stand mixer now. I'm just going to give it a mix until everything's well combined, and I don't see any more flour clumps or like sugar lumps or any of that. And it's all just one big homogeneous cake batter. Okay, I'm gonna wipe down the sides of my stand mixer since there's a little bit of carrots and the dry ingredients on the side. So I just want to make sure everything's mixed. Also the bottom in case anything's stuck down there. Okay. Just gonna give it one last mix. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna let that sit there, and then this is optional, but I like adding walnuts to my carrot cake. Because it is a very soft cake, I like adding kind of a contrast and having that little crunch, bit of crunch in the cake. So I'm gonna get about a cup of walnuts.
So we just had a great question that came in. Someone would like to know, do you come up with all the recipes by yourself, or are there any individuals who inspire your baking?
Yeah, I actually like to experiment with my baking a lot. For example, with the mochi beignets that you may have seen on my website, that came about because I'm just going to give this a rough chop while I speak. Um, with those mochi beignets, I just thought a lot about how when I used to go to Texas a lot to visit my mom's side of the family, we'd always sit at this one little cafe and eat these really delicious beignets. And so coming back to California, I would notice that I couldn't find any beignets of the same texture. And so I would try to replicate that at home. And so it goes with the same story with all my recipes. Yeah. Okay. Just gonna give this a rough chop, and you don't want any big pieces or whole walnuts because it's gonna be difficult when you're cutting the cake, and it will easily break if you don't have a sharp enough knife. And that is all chopped. I'm just gonna lift this stand mixer, and then I'm gonna scoop everything down so that I can add the walnuts in without it being sticky. Okay, awesome. Oops. Let me take this out so I can add more. Okay. Okay, and you just want to mix everything until it's just combined. Make sure you not over mix it as to not develop the gluten too much and create a chewy texture. Okay, so as you can see, it's a pretty easy cake recipe. It's very forgiving in terms of how much you add with, say, the carrots, the walnuts. You can add like more or less according to what you prefer. So these are two cake molds that I have. These are 8-inch pans. I would say this recipe works the best with 6 or 7-inch pans. I'm making a pretty thin one because it's just for my family. But for 8 or 9 inch pans or any bigger, I would recommend doubling up on the recipe. But with 8 inch, you can definitely still make it work. Okay, so I'm just gonna take parchment paper and measure this out. Okay, scissors. So what I like doing is measuring the parchment paper so that it's just about the size of the cake pan. And then I'm going to cut it along. Strip like that. And then what I like doing to make it fit into the cake pans is just fold it. Okay, and I'm just going to fold it over and over until I get kind of a triangle shape. And what I mean by that is I'm going to start folding it in half again. Once it gets to this size, instead of folding it half again, what I do is I take one of the corners and I fold it in half like that, kind of, if that makes sense. If you can see. Maybe straight again, since the camera might not have caught that. So I folded it twice in half, and now it's like this, a rectangle. What I do is I just take one of the corners, and then instead of folding it like in half, like I did the previous times, just gonna fold it at the corner so that it starts forming a kind of triangle shape. Just gonna fold that, make sure it's folded well. And then I'm gonna do the same thing at the corner. I'm gonna fold it again. And then just one more time. Okay. And then I'm gonna take my scissors. And you want to have the point of your parchment paper at the center of the pan. And then you're gonna measure roughly how much you need to cut off. So I want to cut off about, you can see with my hand in the way, but at its radius, the center of the pan, you just want to cut off the excess right here about. So up until the edge of the pan. And then you can unfold it. Usually it's a little extra, bigger than it needs to be. You fold it and you get a circle. And you can see that it fits with the pan. So that's what I usually like doing with my cake molds. So that's one. And then I'll do it again with this one. So again, yeah, was there a question?
No question from the audience, but I figured I would ask, what inspired you to make this recipe?
Yeah, for this recipe, I thought that I'm just gonna stop with parchment paper for a second because it's very quickly noisy. So for this recipe, I wanted to bake something for the fall season for my family and friends, and I wanted to find something that was a little bit non-traditional, and not go for the pie route, because I don't know about you, but I've had one too many pies this season, and so I thought that the carrot cake would be the perfect option since, it's a root vegetable and also it has the hints of vanilla and cinnamon and nutmeg, which I think tie in really well to the fall season. And then I thought that the lemon buttercream would be kind of a fresh twist, since I know that Thanksgiving I always eat so much and I feel so heavy, that when it comes to dessert, I just feel like it's too much. Um, and so the lemon buttercream it gives it a very fresh taste, and it contrasts very well with the more warmer notes in the cake that you'll taste. So it won't feel too heavy when you're going for the dessert at your Thanksgiving dinner. So I'm going to do the same thing and fold it in half. And then do it again. Just want to make sure that I'm doing this in view. I folded it in half twice. And now again, we're going to take the corner and kind of just fold it in half like that at the corner instead of making a square. You're going to go for a triangle. And then you're going to do the same thing where you fold at the corner. Okay. And then you're going to measure again, see how much you need to cut off. You're going to point the tip at the center of your pan and then measure it up all the way until the edge of your pan and cut off the remaining parchment paper. Awesome. And then I'm just going to take these pans and oil them. To be honest, if you are low on parchment paper, all you need is a very well-oiled or buttered pan. The parchment paper is kind of just like extra insurance to make sure that your cake comes out smoothly. So make sure to get the sides as you go. Okay, and I'm just going to put this piece in. Make sure it covers all the sides and that on top it is also oiled so it doesn't stick to the cake when you take it off.
So while you're doing that, we do have a few questions that came in. These two kind of go hand in hand, and they're asking, what are the plans for the future for the bakery? And when you do come back to Baltimore, do you plan to bring the bakery with you?
Yeah, so that second question actually kind of answers the first. So I'm really hoping once everything is back to normal and when I do come back to Baltimore and go to school at Hopkins, that I can bring this back with me and share it with the Hopkins community. This spring semester, I'm hoping to come back and I'm trying to work out the logistics of bringing Le Crumb to Baltimore in the spring, but we'll see. But I'll definitely let you guys know as soon as possible once I figure that out. But yeah,
Great.
as for my
Thank you.
plans, yeah, of course. I'm just hoping to share this with as many people in my community as much as possible. Having this publicized in Orange Coast Magazine has really helped spreading the mission. And then I'm hoping to do the same once we go back to Hopkins. So now that these two are greased, I'm just gonna wipe my hands. We can pour the cake batter into these molds. I'm just gonna scoop this down so that it doesn't fall everywhere.
We did have another question come in, and they wanted to know, is there a benefit to making this vegan versus traditional?
Yeah, I mean, with vegan, if you have anyone who is vegan at your dinner table, it's definitely helpful. And then to me personally, there's not like a huge effect since there's not a lot of butter. If you'll notice in the ingredient list, it's only in the buttercream and it's only like 3 tablespoons of butter. But with it being vegan, it makes me personally feel a little less guilt-free when eating this, since I'll be stuffing myself with mashed potatoes and turkey. So it's just nice to know that I'm not totally going all out Thanksgiving. So I'm going to divide these equally into the cake molds.
That's great. Thanks, Kristen. While you do that, I do have a poll. I figured it'd be nice to do some polling for the holiday season. And with what you just shared, we'll go ahead and launch that poll. What are folks most looking forward to on their Thanksgiving table this Thursday?
And then I'm just going to spread this out before I continue adding more. So like I said before, with the 6 and 7-inch cake pans, if you're using that for this recipe, it's going to give you about 2 1-inch cakes. Whereas if you're using it with an 8-inch pan, it's going to give you about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. And that's just preference. I like my cakes to be kind of thick. I've baked 2 of them in an 8-inch mold with this recipe doubled, so I can show you that, what it looks like if I double the recipe, but it's just preference if you prefer a thicker or thinner cake. So once this is spread out.
And it looks like folks are most excited to have this vegan carrot cake on their Thanksgiving table this week.
That is so sweet. Thank you. Okay. Add the remaining carrot cake and make sure that it's not it's spread out as evenly as possible, especially in the center. You don't want it to be higher than the rest of the cake because it's going to dome up and you'll have to cut it once it's out of the oven to be able to layer these cakes. So I'm just going to spread this all around as best I can. It's a pretty non-fuss recipe. And then once these are good to go into the oven, you get a knife and they'll go into the oven. Yeah.
Sorry, Jane's asking, are you smushing it down or just spreading it around?
I'm just kind of spreading it around to make sure that it's all even and flat in the cake pan, and to make sure that the center, this is what I find most important when making this recipe, is to make sure that the center isn't kind of piled high up compared to the rest. But yeah, I don't think there's a need to smush it down since it's pretty dense as is. So here we go. So these are going to go into 350-degree oven for 30 minutes or until you notice that when you poke a toothpick in the center, it'll come out clean. No, it won't feel damp, or there won't be any cake batter or residue on it, and that's when you know it'll be done. So I'm going to put these in the oven and clean all of this up so it's a cleaner setting when I do the buttercream. So I will be right back.
So while Kristen's taking care of that, we can do another poll. I think this is just feeling thankful for the upcoming season or what you're most thankful for this year, but we'll go ahead and launch that and give Kristen a few minutes. And if there's anything that may have been missed in the poll as one of your options, feel free to drop that into the chat as well.
So last night I baked these 2 cakes and I doubled up the recipe with these 8-inch cake pans. So you can see here, let me see, let me lift up the whole cake pan where you can see that it's pretty thick. This is about 1 inch each cake. So once they pile up, it's going to be about 2 inches. So this is personal preference on how I like the cake to be a little thicker. Because if you do this recipe in the 8 or 9-inch pan, it's going to give you a pretty thin cake. But preference. So with these cakes, I'm just going to leave it here, and we can start on buttercream. Just going to move these out of the way.
So Kristen, there's a few questions coming in. One of the first is, how did you become such a great baker?
Yeah, I actually think I have a lot of work to do and a lot of learning to do, and there's always improvement. But definitely practice with these recipes, especially since I make them on my own. It's definitely not perfect the first try, or even like a third try. It always takes a couple tries to get everything perfect to how you want it to be. So practice makes perfect, as cheesy as that sounds.
That's wonderful. Isabel would like to know, what are your favorite classes this semester?
Yeah, so I'm a public health and neuroscience major, like I said. While I'm talking, I'm just going to add the powdered sugar in. So I'm taking, for public health, I'm taking an epidemiology class, in which I really love, since the content applies perfectly now to the circumstances we're in. And also the professors are great. They are always there for the students and really want us to understand and apply the materials, and which I'm really grateful for. So now that the butter is in, I'm just gonna grab the butter, or sorry, now that the powdered sugar is in, I'm just gonna get the butter from the fridge. And then what you wanna do with the butter is to not add like a hunk of 3 tablespoons worth of butter in. What you want to do is chop it up into small bits so that when it mixes with the powdered sugar, it won't be kind of just packed into one blob. So that will help with making it spread more quicker.
So we have one more question. Someone's asking, do you think cream cheese frosting would taste nice with this cake?
Yeah, of course. I usually eat carrot cake with cream cheese frosting, so I think this would work perfectly with this recipe. Okay, so what I did with my butter is instead of taking tablespoons with butter, I just took teaspoons, and so there are 9 little blobs all around. And then I'm just gonna get the whisk attachment, secure it on, and then sure all the butter's off my spatula. Okay, and I'm gonna start on a slow whisk setting as to not get the powdered sugar everywhere. And you're not gonna notice a huge difference at first, but it takes a while for all of this to become a liquid, as it is a lot of powdered sugar. So now that I can see the butter is kind of broken about throughout the powdered sugar, it doesn't have to be completely mixed in. We're gonna get the lemon juice to help with that. So I'm gonna cut up this remaining lemon and then squeeze it onto here. And then this does call for quite a lot of lemon juice. If you prefer, if you give it a taste and you think it's too thick, but you want it to be thinner, but you don't want it to be more lemony tasting, what you can do is add a little bit of water or milk. It will taste the same in the end, But you can add that instead of lemon juice or apple cider vinegar to not make it too bitter or sour for this buttercream.
So to go along with some of the polls, someone is asking you, what are you most thankful for this season?
Yeah, for this season, I'm really thankful for my friends and family. Um, Truly, this year, I've received unimaginable support from just starting school again to also starting this long held dream of mine of starting a bakery. Since I initially thought it was impossible to ever do something like this, but to always have such a supportive environment around me has really made it possible for me to achieve all of this. So let me just toss this. So that was about 2 teaspoons of lemon. I'm just going to squeeze this remaining one, get the seeds out. Okay. Oh, that has some part of seed in. Okay. Let me get the seed out.
Christin, do you have a favorite item that you've ever baked?
Favorite item? Let's see. Oh, when I was in 5th grade, we read Maniac McGee, and they made us. Was it Maniac McGee? I think it was a different book, but for the point of the story, we read a book in which they made molasses bread. So I'm just gonna start this up on slow again. We made molasses bread, and I had never known about molasses bread before. And so I thought it was really interesting. And the teachers were kind enough to make us molasses bread and more lemon juice, since I've noticed that it's getting thicker and still needs a little bit more liquid. The teachers were kind enough to make us molasses bread, and I was really, really captivated by it and how amazing it was with the raisins mixed in. And so I asked my teachers for the recipe, and I didn't get the recipe for, I think, like half the school year. I think they just forgot about it. And so once I did get the recipe, I baked it nonstop. I think I must have baked like a total of like 30 loaves because I was so obsessed with it. And I haven't baked it in a while, but that really reminds me that I want to bake it again. But yeah, molasses is also a great ingredient for the fall season.
That's awesome. I know that this is a relatively new recipe for you, but are there any other new recipes that you're working on right now?
Yeah, for the Christmas season, for the winter, I'm just gonna toss this. I was trying to think of something that would be suitable for the winter. And I've been looking into making a spicy chocolate cake. I don't know how well it's going to turn out since I haven't tried it yet. I remember when I was little, I'm just going to scoop the sides. I remember when I was little, I had spicy chocolate for the first time when I went on a field trip, and I thought I would bring that back since everyone loves chocolate, and the spiciness from the chili powder brings in that kind of warmer tone to the chocolate cake. So I'll keep you guys posted on that recipe and how it turns out. Okay, just gonna scoop the sides so that everything's well combined. Mix. see here that, let me scoop this out so it doesn't all fall at once. That the powdered sugar mixed with everything else is starting to clump up. So if you can see, it's starting to get clumpy. That's a good sign. Don't worry, it's going to smooth out. We just need more lemon juice to get everything combined. And then once this lemon's all juiced out, I'm going to start zesting these lemons to get that kind of bright yellow flavor and color into the buttercream. So that's about 2 teaspoons in. And then let's see. Okay, buttercream is starting to come together. I'm gonna add the vanilla so that the vanilla from the buttercream and the vanilla from the cake ties in both together. And all you want to do at this point, now that it's starting to become more of a frosting type texture, is to add liquid, enough liquid until you get the right texture that you want. And I accidentally added a seed again. But for those who haven't worked with buttercream before, you want to get it thin enough so that it can easily spread on your cake using a spatula, but thick enough so that it sticks onto the cake, since we're going to be covering the entire cake. So I'm just going to give it a mix again. And then it's almost there. And then I'm going to zest in 1 lemon. Make sure that they're washed before zesting. And this adds in like a very sharp lemon scent and flavor to the buttercream that you wouldn't get from just adding in lemon juice. And you want to make sure that you don't zest too far into the lemon to where you hit the rind, because that's where it will start to become bitter instead of lemony. So just gonna get the main zest.
I think a good tip for that, Kristen, is always getting the yellow part. And once you hit the white part or the pith, then that's when you tend to get that bitter taste.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And then I think it needs a little bit more lemon. It's almost there. Okay. Then I'm just going to scrape the sides to make sure that there aren't any powdered sugar clumps on the sides or at the bottom, and then to just also get a feel of the texture of the buttercream and to see how much more lemon juice I want to add. Okay. So right here, starting to get a good texture for the buttercream. You can see that it holds onto the spatula pretty well. I would say for me personally, I like going a little bit thinner so that it can spread easily on the cake. But just make sure that you're feeling for the buttercream to see how much more juice you need, so that it isn't too thick and will make it difficult to spread. Okay, so one last mix. Awesome. You'll see that it holds onto this whisk perfectly. It's still soft, and like very flexible, and you'll know that it's good for the frosting. Okay, so I'm just gonna get as much as I can off the whisk, and then we can start frosting the cake. Okay. So what I have here is a turntable cake stand. And what I like doing, since I'm going to give away this cake to a friend, is to take parchment paper, about the size of the turntable.
So Kristen, someone's asking really quickly, they bake theirs in a rectangular pan. So how long do you recommend them baking that?
I would say if you're baking it in a square or rectangular baking pan, it should be the same time. Just make sure to check up on it after, say, 30 minutes, to poke a hole in the center and see how much longer you need to bake it for, if need be. But it should be the same baking time. So I like having the parchment paper on top so that once I'm done frosting the cake, I can just easily lift it up without having to worry about ruining the buttercream frosting or cake once it's all set. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of these cakes and let's see, start off with this one. Just place it in the center. And then I'm gonna start off with a pretty generous dollop of the buttercream on the top of this cake so that there's frosting in between the cakes and they stick together. So you just want to start from the center and then smear it about.
So while you're doing that, there is another question. Someone's asking, why do you like baking?
Yeah, I was actually talking to a friend about this since we have very different opinions about baking. I find baking to be very kind of just, I'm in my own world and it's stress free and it's very soothing to me. Remember, ever since I was like in high school, I would bake every time there were finals. I'm just gonna add a little bit more of buttercream. I would bake every time there were finals going around since I found that that was how I would kind of manage my stress. And so I loved baking for my friends and family, just so I'd have like a calming activity during the stressful times.
That's great. Thank you. And Robin's asking a quick question. She'd like to know how long you recommend allowing the cakes to cool before frosting them.
Yeah, that's a good question. I forgot to mention that, but I would say to let your cakes cool completely. What I did was I let them cool overnight and then I cut. As you can see on here with this cake, not sure if you can see, but what I did was I had to cut off the top part since it was kind of domed at the top and I wanted to layer these two. So I would recommend letting them cool completely. If you can't do it overnight, I would say at least 3 hours. And the reason for that is you don't want it to dry out because as soon as you cut it, kind of all the heat comes out and water. You'll have a drier cake than you'd like. Okay, so the center is looking good. And then I'm just gonna take this second layer and instead of just layering it on top, I'm gonna flip it over since the bottom of the cake is always flatter. Oops, some walnuts fell out. I'm just gonna layer it as best I can so that it's flatter because there are always errors when you cut and it won't be as flat as the bottom of the cake pan. So I'm gonna add the remaining buttercream, dollops at a time, starting again from the center and move this out of the way. And once you make this buttercream, you really see how beautiful it is with the flecks of lemon zest throughout. You can really smell the lemon with this cake. Okay. You just want to be gentle with it so that you don't break the cake. Speaking from personal experience, since cakes are very delicate, especially this one since it's pretty soft, with or without walnuts. Okay, I want to start smearing on the sides so that I can later coat the sides with walnuts as well. It's okay if the buttercream doesn't look too great when you frost it. You can just cover it up with walnuts. If you don't like the walnuts, you can cover it up with flowers. It's a very forgiving cake. Make sure I'm getting the bottom.
When you were back on campus last year for your freshman year, were you baking for any of your friends at that time too?
Actually wasn't because last year I was a freshman living in the dorms and I didn't use the kitchen that much. So unfortunately I didn't, but hopefully this upcoming semester, this upcoming year I can. Okay, I do the same, this dollop, spread it to the sides. And if you are coating this cake with walnuts like I am, which I'm doing, I'm gonna coat the walnuts on the side. You want to give the sides a generous coating of the buttercream to make sure that there's enough to stick onto, so the walnuts can stick onto the cake very well.
So there's a few questions about this cake in particular. The first one is, how would you recommend storing it until Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I I would say store this in the fridge in an airtight container if you can. I think this cake can be stored, I'm going to say 5-6 days until the buttercream starts to get hard. But to prevent that, I think the best thing to do would be to store it in an airtight container to preserve the buttercream as long as possible.
Great, thank you. And then one other question is, would this cake be good as cupcakes?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think.
No, I think that might be me. That's okay. One other question was, would this cake be good as cupcakes?
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. That was another thing I wanted to mention. If you want to make this as cupcakes, this recipe would make about 8 to 12 cupcakes, depending on how full you fill up the cupcake liners. But this recipe would be perfect as cupcakes as well.
And then one last question is, can this cake be frozen or freezed afterwards? And how long would you recommend that?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend freezing this cake because once the buttercream is frozen and then defrosted, it might not have the same texture as you would like making it and like eating it right away. Okay, almost done. I just want to get the sides and then I'm going to touch it on the top. Scrape some from the top so that I cover the sides generously. Make sure I get the bottom.
So Judy's asking, would it be okay to freeze the cake and then frost it later?
Yeah, of course. The carrot cake you can definitely freeze for as long as you want. They're pretty easy. So just gonna smooth this. It's even. Okay. And then with the top, I have a little bit of buttercream left. I'm gonna get the remaining buttercream, put it at the top. Yay, okay. I think the hardest part of frosting, it's kind of like painting, is to know when to stop. Since it's easy to get lost in it after a while. So now that that is frosted, I'm going to take my cutting board again. And then I'm going to get the walnuts. I would say to start off with a cup at first. I'm just going to eyeball it. And give it a rough chop. Again, you want pretty small pieces so that it's small enough to cling onto the sides of the cake. The reason I like adding walnuts to the buttercream is again the contrast of the soft buttercream with the crunchiness of the walnuts, and to let people eating it know what's inside the cake as well. Big pieces I missed. Awesome. So the easiest way to cover the sides of the cake with walnuts is to actually use your hands, as messy as that may sound. I tried doing this with a spoon once. It took me forever. So what you're gonna do is just grab a handful of walnuts and then kind of smush it up against the cake so that it grabs. And then you just wanna take the remaining. So I'm gonna do it again at the front. So hopefully you can see, but I'm just taking a handful of walnuts and then smushing it up against the sides. And it's okay if there's a lot of fall over. Just want to brush that out and then repeat the process all along the cake. This is looking so nice. Okay. I'm really excited to give this to my friend. Okay. And if you see any missing gaps, you can just take a piece that didn't make it to the cake and just plop it on. Yeah, okay, cool. Just gonna do that all around.
Kristen, is there a particular reason that you went with walnuts in this recipe versus any other nut?
Yeah, I would say that I have an excess of walnuts from my banana bread, but I think walnuts pair very well with this carrot cake. I think walnuts, I don't know if it's just me, but like walnuts remind me of the fall season, especially in when it's like cold, like with kind of the winter desserts. I usually opt for walnuts. Let me shake off this excess. Since it pairs well with the warmer flavors during this season.
So there is one more question. Laurel just asked, would raisins have been good to add to the cake mix as well?
Yeah, raisins would have been amazing. I chose not to add the raisins since I already have the walnuts in, but you can definitely add both, or just raisins or neither. Uh, what's really good is if you do rum soaked raisins to like add that extra kind of moisture and flavor. So you just soak the raisins in rum overnight, um, and then add it to the cake as you would with the walnuts.
They're definitely appreciating that pro tip of adding rum to the raisins.
Uh, okay, almost done. Okay, I'm just gonna chop up a few more walnuts.
Diane's asking if you've ever added crushed pineapple to the carrot cake mixture. And if so, would you just strain the juice off and include the actual meat of the pineapple?
Yeah, I have never made carrot cake with pineapple before, but I've had it with pineapple, and I would say just to add it the same as you would with the carrots, but I would definitely drain the juice if you're using canned pineapple so that it's not too liquidy um, when you add it to the batter.
And I know, Kristen, we initially just shared the ingredients list, but maybe now after this, we can create a full recipe list and share this with the group afterwards as well.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Okay. So I'm just adding walnuts here and there in places that I missed. Make sure that it's well coated, that there aren't any gaps in the cake. And then I'm noticing that it's time for me to take out my cake from the oven. So let me just take that out really quickly. And then we can put into this cake. Okay. Awesome. Thanks. And then, let's see. I made candied lemon peel last night. I would add it to this cake for the finishing touch so that people know there's lemon instead of the typical um, cream cheese frosting. Okay, awesome. So that is the finished product. Okay, should we cut into this cake now?
I think 100% yes.
Okay, let me grab a plate. I'm gonna move this to the side later. then cut down. And you want to get your sharpest knife so that you're cutting through the walnuts and not just kind of like smushing it to the side and ruining the cake. So I'll cut a pretty thick slice so you guys can see the cross section. Let me grab a fork. So I'm not sure how well you can see from this angle, but you'll see if I bring it up closer to the camera. Let me move this mixer actually so that it's not in the way anymore. But I love that this is a 2-layer cake since you get a bite of the frosting on the outside, obviously. Can you see my cake? Okay. But you also see the kind of layer in between that kind of separates the 2 layers, which is really nice. So that it's not all cake and walnuts throughout. So you can see how dense it is and how moist. I added a lot of carrots to this recipe to make sure that it didn't dry out. But adding raisins to this, especially rum-soaked raisins too, will definitely help with that. So, cheers.
Thanks so much, Kristen. That looks so delicious.
Every time I eat this, I love it.
I think you've definitely set yourself up for a Food Network show, hopefully sometime soon. And I think many of us would watch that. On behalf of everyone who's been baking with you alongside, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to do this with us this afternoon. I can't think of anything better to kind of kick off the week going into Thanksgiving. So we really do appreciate it all. And as I mentioned to everyone, we'll share the full recipe with everyone. Afterwards, you'll also receive a survey to just let us know how we did and if there are any other events that you'd like to see. And we'll definitely share all of Kristin's information as well so that you guys can continue to follow her along this journey. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Relations, we have a lot of great holiday programming coming up. For those who need something after, stuffing themselves on Thursday, we have a bar workout class that's taking place on Saturday. We're going to do some hand lettering in December and also a few other cooking classes as well. So just stay tuned to our calendar. But I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I wish you all a very safe and healthy, happy Thanksgiving with your family. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this event, Crystal. If you guys are in the area, in the Orange County area, this carrot cake is available to order. So if you want, just go to our website, La Creme Bakery, and order it just in time for your Thanksgiving table as well.
Thank you so much. Have a great one, Kristen. Bye-bye.
Of course. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.